I'm good.
All right, so I will call the meeting to order in Peter's absence. Peter said that he may be calling in at about 6:30, but he's in Hartford at some thing, and so we have a quorum without him, so we can go forward. And then if he gets here halfway through by car, that's cool. He said he'll be a little late to the council meeting probably. So 6:07, I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is the opportunity for the public to address the committee. Is there anyone here? I don't see anybody, don't see anyone on Zoom. So we can move on from that. The next is staff reports. Is there any report?
Nope.
No, okay. The next item on the agenda is approval of our minutes from our April 11th meeting. Al, I know you didn't make it, but could you move their approval and then you can abstain if you'd like?
Sure. Yes, I make a motion to approve the minute meetings of our April 22 meeting,
11th, April 11th.
April 11th meeting.
Okay, I'll second it. I will vote in favor, and Al, are you abstaining?
I am abstaining, yes.
Minutes pass 1-0. The next item on the agenda is old business. We don't have any old business. So we have two items of new business. The first is the financial statements as of March 31st, 2022. And they can be found beginning on, I don't have page numbers here.
8,
On the,
page 6.
I don't know if you're looking at my packet or
I'm
Or the
looking at the
town council
finance
packet.
packet, the finance committee.
they're
packet.
on page 4 of my packet.
Okay.
So, although there's a random email interspersed in the middle of them. So anyway, Charmaine, why don't you walk us through them?
Okay, all right, so the overall picture is good. As it relates to revenues, for every revenue stream that we pretty much receive, with the exception of interest income, we are doing consistently as we have in the past or better. So we don't have any problems with our revenues. First item up is tax collection. We are at 98.1% versus 96 in prior year during this quarter. So our real estate collections is approximately 84% of the levy. And again, we've received at 98.5% as compared to 97% last year for that particular section of the levy. Motor vehicle taxes, we're collecting well on motor vehicle taxes as well as compared to 94.5% compared to 93 of last year. Again, when you look at licenses and permits, we are well over what we budgeted for. Then we, and so we're doing Mike Ninto's team has far surpassed their budgeted revenue for licenses and permits, and we're still only in March. So more is to come. Our state support, the education cost sharing grant, we've gotten 50% of that, as we always do. We have not received any notification that we won't get the balance of it. So we expect to receive the balance of it. If not, it hasn't been reconciled for April yet because April just closed. But it's likely to be in our April reconciliation. And so if it is not, I will be making a call. But more than likely it'll be there as usual. The state support for general government. So these are our pilot grants. So as you all know, because we've been appropriating those dollars in this current fiscal year, we've received more than what we had budgeted for. So thus far, we've received $4,002,846 more than budget. Again, it's shown up in your respective pilot appropriations memos, one of which will be discussed in this meeting. Fines and forfeitures, again, higher than expected. Let's see. And again, the disappointing revenue stream are the interest rates, because the interest rates are so abysmal. They're at 0.10% compared to last year, which was still bad, 0.13%, but it's just getting worse. So we're not making our revenue off of interest as we had hoped, but we also don't put a whole lot of stock into interest income, especially after last year. Okay. Daycare fund, to note, they're doing really well. Their respective, their fund balance is $743,000 compared to prior years. They're doing really well. So, and I think I know much of that is attributed to their PPP loans that they received. They received 2, and they were forgiven both of those loans. So they're able to build their fund balance. Now, our rec program. So their expenditures exceeded, their expenditures exceeded revenues by about $79,000. Again, this is not great, but it is not surprising because we expected a shortfall based off of the way they budgeted for this current fiscal year. So it's, I guess, on par from the standpoint of a shortfall based off of what we understood was going to be happening this fiscal year. The CNR fund. So again, we're drawing your attention back to the movements related to ARPA. Again, that'll be discussed again at the end of this particular subject. ARPA monies were just thrusted upon the respective municipalities last year, if you all recall, and we just parked it. And at the time, even the auditors were trying to figure out what's the best way to manage and report on these monies. So we parked it in CNR last year when we received it. So now that we've been given specific guidance to move that money from CNR into its own special revenue fund so that we can be as transparent as possible when all the charges for all the respective projects are hitting. They hit one fund. There's no transfer of money. It just all gets hit to one fund. So we've set up a special revenue account. So therefore, the $3,771,446 that we were given, that's the first tranche of our allocation of ARPA funds, will be transferred to that special revenue fund. And then you all start to see that in your quarterly reports. So it's going to, of course, drop the fund balance from $4,086,000 to $980,000, which is really its true fund balance. Is that clear? Okay. Debt service fund. There's a substantial drop in the debt service fund, but that's due to us paying down what we're supposed to be paying down. We've had some invoices come in for our debt service, so we've been making those payments, and therein lies the natural drop in the debt service fund. And that the respective transfers are going to happen from the other funds that feed into that fund, happen at the end of the year. So for the most part, I mean, unless there's anything that was surprising, you've got all the internal service funds, the health insurance fund, everything is pretty much on par. Does anyone have any concerns or questions?
Al, do you? I don't.
Yeah, just a couple of, I think, fairly easy, fast questions, but I just nonetheless, when we talk about the health insurance fund, I'm looking at the liabilities for accrued medical claims. I don't know what page number this is. It's not a page number, but basically the balance doesn't change. Now, the way I'm just trying to understand this, this is just an estimate, and it'll be adjusted at year end. That's why the balance didn't change from year to year in the accrual.
Let me see, I'm trying to get to that section.
Yeah, and the health insurance fund liabilities.
God bless you.
Let's see.
Health insurance fund. Okay. Accrued medical claims. Right. So based off of when we're looking at this from Anthem, it hasn't changed. There's a reconciliation that happens at the end.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Okay.
Yep. That's what I thought, but I said, oh, that's a little strange that it hasn't moved. But that's what I thought. I just wanted to hear it. Okay, now let's see. Yeah, getting back to the daycare, just for a second here, let me get back myself. Um,
Just trying to get to
yeah, the daycare, the state support other and revenues.
the state, I'm sorry, one more time.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the daycare fund revenues, third line down, state support other.
Yes.
Okay, now what is that? What's that budget for 20?
So they, and this is their budget. They create their own budget and they just
Yeah.
basically give it to us after it's been vetted by their board. My
Mhm.
understanding is when they go out and get these grants, additional grants over and above their traditional ones from the Office of Early Childhood,
Mhm.
they, that's what they're attributing it to. So they recently submitted a request for an expansion grant for $25,000 for summer camp stuff that they want to do this summer. So that would fall into alignment with that because that's not one of their standard grants that they get from the Office of Early Childhood.
That's
Okay,
we're going to approve on the agenda later today for the town.
Correct. They're two separate, yes. One
okay,
for Park and Rec, and then the executive director is submitting for the daycare.
And it looks
okay.
to me like they would meet the requirements, so.
Any other questions?
Yeah, same page, equipment, they budgeted 119K. Does that look like that's gonna happen or? Because I don't see anything there right now.
So, again, right, it's very little happening. Actually, that's last year. They only spent $891.
Right,
Based off of the nature of our relationship with them, we're only supposed to pay their bills, pay their people, and do their 990. So when we get the budget, I have no actual clarity on how or why they got to $119,000 for their equipment because I don't participate in their budget development process.
okay.
I can't actually speak to that.
Mhm. Okay. 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 Just one more look at, and then I think I'll be done. Now for the Parks and Rec, I'm looking at comparative statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance March 31st. I'm looking at revenues, and there are two revenue items where there's a budget, one's for employee wellness, the other is for charge for services, and there's nothing received on there, no revenues. Is that going to happen, do you think?
Daily facilities, employee wellness. So the employee wellness is coming from the health insurance fund. So that's so by the time all of that gets reconciled, because we're on a January to December plan, I'm
Mhm.
hoping and believing that will catch itself up once we get our data from from HR as to who's part of that program. So Parks and Rec has a representative, I forgot the young lady's name, who coordinates and works with HR. And once we know who those people are, then it gets fed through from the health insurance fund. But until we get that data, it doesn't move. That's what
Okay.
his budget is for. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get that.
Okay. And the charge for services for 10 grand?
Right, so the charges for services, so that's not membership fee or admissions or stuff like that. That's my belief when somebody rents out a room or space at Park and Rec. Ryan actually just joined, so he might be able to assist on that front. That's what my understanding is. So if people aren't actually using conference space there and not charging, last year that was at a lull until the Eastern Highlands Health District was charged for their use of the facility for all those clinics that they were running. But I don't know that there's been too much activity with people wanting to use the space either there or at Leonard Hall, MCC or Leonard Hall.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one question. It's not really our purview, but it's part of what we approved, the cafeteria fund for the school. We've been offering free lunch for everyone. It's been federally funded. So I'm guessing, well, so first of all, what's the deficit in the fund? Oh, I'm sorry, I think I know. Let me guess. Is it that the feds didn't pay for it over the summer and we continue to offer it to kids in?
No, they
No.
did. They did.
So what's the deficit in that fund?
So the reason why I chuckled is because it's interesting math that the Fed uses to reimburse per meal. The reimbursement is for the meal. It doesn't cover overhead or any of that, the other stuff. That those reimbursement rates are not built off of overhead. Real overhead for New England versus Nebraska.
So they don't pay for staff, but they pay for food?
Well, they put a dollar amount, and if
Okay.
you can stuff staff in that dollar amount per meal, great. If you can't, so sorry for you. So there's catering that's being done, which is how she makes up the difference. Shifting of staff, which is also how she makes up the difference. R19 is considered a client, so I was able to get the State Department of Education Child Nutrition Program to accept, and also the ESSER grant award to be a portion of R19 to be able to pay, because at one point they were saying you can't use those federal dollars to pay for the food program and so on and so forth. So that's another way in which they've cut down on their shortfall, is being able to charge R19 as a client, and the client is saying, I don't own child nutrition, but my servicer is charging me more for this service. So I need to, and it's not in my budget, I need to pay for it. So she was able, the superintendent at R19 was able to direct federal funds to cover, but they're still at a shortfall, 27,078. I'm not alarmed by 27,078 as of March, because claims are always delayed about 45 to 60 days. Because, so what I'm looking at in March is probably claims for through January versus through February and March. So if it was a much bigger number, I would be having conversations with the superintendent and the director of food service, but it's 27,000.
And then that federal money is going away, but I know the state budget has provided about $30 million for the state to continue this program. What's our annual cost if the state or federal dollars ever went away? What would the annual cost be to continue not charging people for lunch in the Mansfield school system?
Well, it's really more or less the budget, because that we've been looking at. So she's approximately $1 million
It's about $1 million a year.
to run her program. And again, she hasn't been, prior to the pandemic, apparently, I mean, and you all probably know better than me, we're making money hand over fist to a point where she can't be really making great profit, because she's got limitations and restrictions, because she was taking federal funds for free and reduced students. Okay, but she was, so she had to control how much money she took in so that she didn't go over her threshold. Now, but there's a lot of meetings, like I was just surprised that this food was coming in. There's a lot of meetings that aren't had with food. So she's not catering the meetings for the board or the meetings for the town. She's got some exchange between youth services and the senior center. She does do a little support there. So every time that they want to go out to do something, I try and redirect it so we can kind of keep it all in the family, so to speak, so that there is no shortfall. Whatever shortfall that she has, the Board of Ed has to eat that shortfall. So anytime we can sort of mitigate that by one agency servicing another for a fee, I try and get that done. So,
Thanks.
any
Are
other
there
questions?
other questions on the financials? If not, Then Al, would you mind moving to recommend their approval to the town council?
Yes, I have no problem at all with that. This is a very good job and very good reporting. Therefore, I recommend that we bring forth these financial statements dated March 31st, 2022 to the town council.
And I will second. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
They pass, and we will move on to item number 3, which is the proposed additional appropriations for FY 21-22 and ARPA allocation. So Charmaine and Ryan, when I look at this PDF, by the way, my PDF, this begins on page 95. It's the last 2
I was
pages,
gonna say.
which is probably the easier way to find it. So go ahead, Charmaine and Ryan, why don't you talk us through this? This looks to me like what we talked about at the council meeting on April 11th.
It is.
Okay.
So Ryan, did you want to tee it up?
Yep, no, this is in concept, everything's already been, discussed and shared with council. I believe there was some additional discussion about it, the April 25th council meeting. So there's a little over $1.5 million worth of high priority and or time sensitive DPW needs right now. And council obviously looking to address some of those needs, which include the emergency replacement of the failed culvert at Hunting Lodge Road, amongst a number of other items that are referenced in the packet. And given our pilot situation, our healthy surplus pilot funds that have otherwise still been unappropriated in the current fiscal year, FY 21-22, it seemed using a portion of those funds to offset these costs made good sense. However, supplementing that with ARPA funds to kind of reduce the blow to pilot seemed to be the way to go in my recommendation. So it's a $1 million and then $555,000 split. The first being from pilot and the second being from American Rescue Plan. The only thing that we haven't really discussed that I should probably point out is that $555,000 from Rescue Plan, that's a big chunk of change that wasn't part of my original Rescue Plan recommendation. So at some point, we'll have to have a discussion with the council about where that adjustment, quote unquote, is coming from. One option would be, the middle school water project. That's obviously the biggest project, sort of unapproved, if you will, by the council. And so, certainly taking $555,000 from that column is probably the path of least resistance that doesn't cause us to step aside or redirect from anything we we're planning to do. But that's the quick and dirty of it.
Could you remind me, after the council allocated ARPA dollars a few months ago, what have we left in ARPA that the council has not yet voted to endorse or approve?
So there are just 3 items that the council has either not fully greenlit or conditionally, quote unquote, greenlit. You want that last bucket?
Yes.
So the 3 items were the middle school water project, $1.25 million. The municipal facilities, phase 2, which part of that funding is included in this year's capital plan to the tune of $75,000, and then $150,000 would the remainder would come from Rescue Plan, and then also I believe $150,000 for the we're actually trying to rename it now, and I'm trying to remember the name that Linda came up with, but what we were calling the Hunting Lodge Road Neighborhood Plan. There's another name that we think is better, but those are the 3 items that were not. Council didn't say no, but it was, let's talk about this more.
And can you explain what the consequence would be if we, rather than pulling money out of ARPA, pulled the entire $1.5 million for these projects out of the pilot line item? What would be the consequence to our fund balance in the budget?
So I guess the consequence would be, maybe a few things to point to. First, it's just sort of an accuracy, I guess, of reporting. So the information that we've shared during, budget presentations during the budget season, as well as what is planned for tomorrow night. The percentages that we're projecting in terms of fund balance would be dramatically different than anything we've shown thus far, because we've counted on some healthy contribution to fund balance from unspent, quote unquote, unappropriated pilot funds in the current budget year. And so if we basically, for all intents and purposes, zeroed that out, because it's essentially what would happen, was it $30,000, Charmaine? Is that what the residual would be?
80. Oh, actually, no, 30, because it's 5.5. Yep.
Yeah, it's 5.5. Yeah, so it's like 1.58 gets reduced down to 0.03 million, right? Basically. So $30,000. So essentially, we would make no meaningful contribution, but well, we still could make a sizable contribution to fund balance, but it's sort of an unknown at this point, because it would come from however our financials shook out at the end of the year in terms of actual expenditures compared to budgeted expenditures and actual revenue compared to budgeted revenue. So it would certainly negate any chance we have to really make demonstrable progress towards that 17% council goal. And that's basically the biggest reason, Ben, why I didn't think it seemed like too much to wipe that out entirely. When I think that it's to be honest, I think it's would be a entirely responsible use of rescue plan funds. I know that we want to be careful. I know you've kind of gone on the record many times as saying that how you feel that ARPA is intended to be, community stimulation dollars, and we were shying away from infrastructure funding for that reason. I know some communities have gone all in. They're doing all infrastructure projects. They're doing a lot of potholes right now, or culverts right now. But to me, these are emerging needs, and emergency needs. In the case of the Hunting Lodge Road culvert is one example. And I think using about $500,000 from rescue plan to do some of this stuff, that's not disproportionate to the public works needs that we face right now.
And part of the problem, as I understand it, is with a 7% increase in the general fund, the percentage was, if we did nothing, the percentage would have dropped anyway.
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
even if the dollar amount, our fund balance dollar amount would maybe go up nominally, the fact that our budget's growing means the percentage that represents of our total budget goes down. And so that would be kind of a crooked number to explain.
Al, do you have any questions or thoughts?
No, I thank Ryan for walking us through this. It makes sense what he's saying. And I really don't have any questions.
Okay, well, I'm comfortable with these motions and making this recommendation. I can say this at the council meeting tonight. My request would be that the sort of ARPA dollars are the last dollars out. As in, we should spend the state dollars that we've allocated first, and then by the time we get those projects, spent or underway or whatever, that we will have closed the books on next year, or on the current year, and we'll have a better sense of what our general operating surplus actually is. Because I just think, from my perspective, 15% is the right target for fund balance, and we often add a few, a percent-ish or some amount of money once we close the books out in a few months for the fiscal year. There's always some money. We do a very good job managing our fiscal house, and so we always underspend where we've budgeted and have a small surplus. We usually do. If that's the case, I'd want to put those dollars into fund balance as we usually do, and maybe have more rescue plan dollars available for other projects. Meaning, if we're at 15%, we can maintain there and use those dollars to pay.
Sherman,
For
do
some
you
of
have
these
any
projects.
idea what the leftover amount at the end of the year would be?
Right.
Because we're very close.
We are, and staff is meeting next week to walk through the edict for the rest of the department heads on how to spend and when we're going to shut them off. Folks have been given in the past time to spend through June. That's stressful in and of itself for a closeout. But then with our new financial management system, it just makes it doubly hard. So we're gonna ask them to be prepared to have the spigot cut off sooner rather than later. So we need to do some analysis. So I can't say that I know that we're gonna have $300,000 to drop in that bucket at the end of the year, as I sit here. right now.
If you were to guess, would it be $3,000 or $30,000 or $300,000 or where in that range?
I wouldn't want to do that because, for example, folks encumber money, right? And so as it stands now, I could look and say, oh, we're looking at about, I don't know, $50,000 based off of what's not encumbered. But that just means they haven't encumbered it yet.
Yeah.
Or they've encumbered money based off of a potential issue that could be addressed by this particular item that we're looking at now, because DPW has one of the biggest budgets, or the biggest budget. So once certain things are voted on, and then John pulls the trigger on his staff to execute against these items, other monies may be freed up because they're not just doing patch jobs on things, they're doing a full-blown addressing of the problem. So I that's a conversation. I don't want to presume that I know, because I don't know.
Yeah, again, I'm fine making this recommendation. I think the only ask is to not spend ARPA first, to spend the state
fair.
funds first, and then when in August or September, when we close the books on the year, to, if there is enough money that we would be bumping fund balance substantially above the 15% benchmark, that we consider replenishing ARPA and using those dollars to pay for the balance of the, whatever the balance might be of the project, and then allowing us to use ARPA dollars for some other project. Could be more infrastructure, whatever it might be. Just, this is a substantial portion of what's left of ARPA, and there's other things that the council might want to do. So
Knowing that we can't use ARPA money for fund balance.
right.
We
So one
can't-
thing, just to toss out there, I want to make sure, well, one, I want to make sure my own understanding is accurate, but I want to make sure, I guess we're all on the same page. So my understanding is, I don't know if it was 2012 or what the year was. I'll say it was 2012. It's close enough. The council adopted a fund balance policy that set the target at 17%. So our pushing towards 17% is not so much like we want to take the 15 and staff want to add like 2% more on top of that as a buffer. I think we're just trying to follow the council's previously set policy, which is targeting 17%.
I think we set 17 was not our target in 2012. We redid it much more recently after we hit our target from 2012. I don't know that we set this. I guess what I'm saying is what I think is in the budget that we adopted with these tweaks for the spending out of the current year surplus to pay for infrastructure for this year, we for this year said 15% is a good number to be at, given where all the projects are that we're trying to fund. And so I think it's just something that we should, again, we should spend the dollars out of the state pocket. That's the decision we're making tonight. We're reserving dollars out of ARPA for the rest of the projects. I think the council should, when we have a sense of what our surplus dollars are, consider and make a final decision on where the dollars should go.
Should come.
Well, should come from, right,
We know we've got this project that has to be paid for,
right.
and it's $550,000 or $425. So the question is, where does the money come from? If at the end of the fiscal year, we can maintain, and I'm not gonna go down to 15, if we had set a goal of 17, that's where I'm gonna stick, or close to it. If we can pay the money out of our general fund and still be at 17 or very close, then we should pay it out of general fund, not out of ARPA money. Is this what you're saying? Well, you would say 15%, but
I would say that that when we know what our surplus is, that we should come back to the committee and to the council and say, okay, the surplus is, say, $300,000, just for the sake of argument. You have $555,000 of projects that you need to fund out of, that you've set aside ARPA for. Would you prefer to fund 300,000 of those projects out of ARPA and put the surplus in fund balance? Would you prefer to pay for some of those projects, some more of those projects out of the current year surplus and put less money into fund balance or no money out of our now understood surplus?
Given what everybody's saying about the cost of borrowing and about the losses in the stock market, our fund balance is going to lose value is what
Naturally.
I'm concerned about.
Naturally.
And we're going to have to spend substantially more money on borrowing for the school, not to mention the facilities. So I'm not quite sure where I want to go, but if we delay the decision on how this project would be funded until after we basically closed the books on 2021, 2022, would that delay implementation of the project?
Yes, because he can't spend unless you all approve it, because it hasn't been appropriated.
No, I'm suggesting that we approve it with the request that we spend the state $1 million first, and then assuming that these projects, as John has said, will be happening throughout the course of the entire fiscal year, including next spring, that just once we close the books, if there is a sizable surplus, the council, rather than being presented with a decision that is put all this money in fund balance, that's what we do with it, that we can revisit whether we want to continue to draw ARPA down for these projects
Right.
or use those dollars to pay for the projects that haven't already been started.
Okay.
But if
here's
we
my
spend
thing.
$1 million in July, and then in August, we needed to get going on another project for 100,000, the council's already approved the expenditure. All I'm saying is to spend the state dollars first.
Okay, here's my thinking. If we approve these motions as they're written,
Mhm.
they can start work on the culvert tomorrow
Yes,
using ARPA funds.
Not
Yeah.
really.
Is that John? Hello.
Not real.
That we can hire a engineer firm to do the design, but the culvert won't get, yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure everybody understood that.
Yeah.
The ball will be rolling.
That's what I mean.
The bulk of the money won't get spent until late of next fiscal year, potentially even depending on design and what, state holds back or something like that. It could take longer than a year from now, potentially. Hopefully not, but there's always that chance.
So,
All right, how about the paving of the roads? I mean, you're gonna start spending that.
Yes, that can start right away. The overlays will be the first thing we'll do, and then we'll get into the mill and pave and the full depth reclamation. So a bulk of that'll be spent this summer. Some of it'll be next spring.
Because my only concern with Ben's proposal right now is I don't want us to create a situation where the appropriation for a single individual project, i.e. the Hunting Lodge Road culvert, is delayed because we have to wait until we find out what the end balance is. So I just don't want that to happen.
so can I
Sure.
speak to an operations, because now I'm feeling kind of where you're going with this. Let's assume that we approve as is, okay? And so this is a transfer to capital.
Right.
It goes into capital, and the ARPA piece is an approved use of funds.
Right.
Okay, that comes from ARPA. It still needs to be charged out of ARPA. So I understand what you're saying. We're charging the CNR, excuse me, the capital account first before we move into ARPA.
Right.
Okay, I understand that. Let's pretend we're chugging along. John gets his engineering specs and all the stuff that he needs. And that number moves up or down.
Yeah.
Then we can come back to you. Okay. When it comes time for year-end transfers, that's what you're talking about. Since it's going to take him a while to get everything done, he's not putting out $1 million straight out the gate, at least not tomorrow, right, John? You're not trying to ask me for that tomorrow. It might be a problem.
I wish I could, but no.
So when we get to year-end transfers, then we reconvene and we say, okay. And then you vote again. So
Right.
instead of using 555 from ARPA, we want to I'll put together the documentation that says we are going to not use
Right,
the 555 from ARPA, or we
Whatever
only
it
need
is.
$100,000 from
Right.
ARPA. We need $455,000 from year-end transfer.
Yeah.
okay, that's the way.
So I didn't realize you were getting
That-
stuck on the operations
That's
aspect of
exactly
it.
what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, all I'm trying to make sure is that if we give you all approval to spend $500,000 of the ARPA dollars tonight, that if there's other ways to pay for these projects between now and when John will have expended $1.55 million, which he has just said may not even be by the end of next June,
Right.
that we consider those options so that we may repurpose those ARPA dollars if there's other money available from other sources. That's all I'm asking for.
So John and I are gonna have to stay close on this because we're talking about this fiscal year's budget or monies. ARPA spans multiple years.
Yes,
So based off of what unless you're just telling me what you want is year-end money. If that's what you're telling me, then that's a no-brainer. I don't need to talk to him about anything. You want us to move year-end money, whether it's $1,000, $100,000 to that project.
I think the idea of doing this as part of the realignment and the capital budget that always happens at the end of the year makes a great deal of sense. It makes a great deal of sense also because it's explainable.
I agree. I think we revisit it when we do year-end transfers, when we
Yes.
close the year out, see how much there is, and if it's enough to make a dent, we
Yes.
consider it. If it's not enough to make a dent, we don't worry about it, but it allows us to not encumber until the end of time, half of our remaining ARPA balance essentially, or a third of it. So, okay.
Yeah, there's gonna be some float in other things, like equipment is delayed. COVID has slowed down everything, so
Yeah.
some other capital items aren't gonna come in as quickly as they used to.
Have you got your grapple truck yet?
No, that's one of them that's delayed
That's
because of the
fiscal year.
chip. Well, we had to keep increasing the money because it kept going up, but we finally have a purchase order and it's in, but they're still saying it's gonna be 6 to 8 months.
So, if we're good, Al, would you make these motions? We can do them together.
Absolutely.
5.
I'm gonna go down the hall.
Okay. Move effective May 9th, 2022 to recommend increasing the FY 2021-22 pilot revenue line item appropriations by $1 million funded by the additional state pilot grant. Move effective May 9th, 2022 to recommend increasing the FY 21-22 general fund transfer to capital/CNR by $1 million funded by the additional state pilot grant. Move effective May 9th, 2022 to recommend amending the capital non-reoccurring fund and the capital improvement program fund budgets to fund $1 million project number 1 as noted above. Move effective May 9th, 2022 to recommend authorizing allocation of $555,000 from American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds for the balance of project number 1, project number 2, and project number 3 is noted above. Project 1 is paving roads, project 2 is shoulder white line striping on every road that gets yellow striping. Project 3 is Hunting Lodge Road culvert replacement to include engineering design.
I will second. Is there any further discussion? If not, we can vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It passes. And so we will make those recommendations tonight to the council. Are there any communications, other business, or future agenda items? If not, then Al, would you move to adjourn?
I move to adjourn this meeting.
Second, we are adjourned. Have a good night. We will see you in 9 minutes.
Good night.